Carlos Nelson with What's Up Kansas City, and today is Martin Luther King's birthday, and I've got special guest here, Mr. Michael Long. Mike, tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what companies you have, and then we're going to get into the discussion of Martin Luther King and what that means to you, what you feel it means to the African American community, and really the things that King stood for.
No doubt, no doubt. So again, Michael Long, I'm the chief visionary for Long Life Enterprises. We have a blog outlet, Hebrew Vision News. I'm hosting a radio show, KUAW, called Shifting Paradigms. And I also have a holistic services health company called Long Life Holistic Services.
And tell them how they can contact you right off the bat. We'll go back into that as we end the program. But
I'm on Facebook, B Michael Long. You can hit me up on my email, bmichaellong@gmail.com. That's pretty much probably the best ways to get me.
All right. So running on down, as we were off camera, and I've asked you to talk about Martin and some things he stood for, and what's important in our community, African American community here in Kansas City and worldwide.
No doubt. I think one of the most important things to recognize what Dr. King did is his evolution as an activist. At first he started out, he was being sponsored by the likes of like the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers, and he was kind of.
I didn't know that.
Oh yeah, he was very intertwined with some inner circles. The NAACP, of course, was interesting in their position in the civil rights movement as well. And you just got to take, in any organization, you got to take the good with the bad and really wrestle with the history of everything, right? And so with Dr. King, he was more of an appropriationist at one point in time. And towards the end of his career, it's quoted by actually Harry Belafonte. He said, we did the long, hard work. We recognize what we did, but we've integrated into a burning building. So he's realizing at the end of his career, towards the end of his life, that, a lot of these efforts are really for naught, because we can't ever change a system that's not broken, but it was never intended for us to fit in the way that we want to exist as human beings.
Yeah, talk about that.
So it's very important, man. I mean, when you just really look at just the protracted history of our experience in America, at least going over the past 400 years, just had an interview with Dre Taylor talking about that 400-year return to Africa. But in the United States, the past 400 years, as much as has changed, much has remained the same. We still have great fights to just recognize our humanity and to be treated with dignity and with equity and with humanity. So it comes even from within ourselves. We got to look at ourselves as well and assess that as well. And that's something that Dr. King did do, is hold a mirror up to ourselves. But he also shone a light on the darkness of our oppressors as well.
Our book of the month this month is a trilogy. Martin Luther King from 1954 to 1963. The books are this thick. And then from 1963 to 1965.
Okay.
And from the third book is from 1963 to 65.
Okay.
And my understanding, because Willa's Bookstore, they're down on the first floor here, she picks our books of the month.
Yeah.
And she picked them. And she said that took her 30 years to write these books on Martin Luther King.
Yeah.
And as I did some research on King, as you say, his philosophy changed at the last. And I looked at a piece that his wife had made this statement that they didn't kill King because of the civil rights stuff. When King started talking about economics, that's when
the war in Vietnam. That was his death warrant. That was his death warrant.
All right, go ahead.
I mean, he addressed what he called the three ills of society: materialism, militarism, and racism. And so, when he did start talking about the Poor People's Campaign, and he started talking about the economics of war, that's when the whole perspective of Dr. King shifted.
Right, the dynamics, the
narrative,
paradigm,
and the
the whole
paradigm, the narrative, and society looked at Dr. King much differently towards the end of his career.
You know what? A lot of people don't that are not old enough. With me being 68, I can remember a lot of different things. People did not like King a lot because even I'm saying African Americans, our mindset, they were saying King was a troublemaker, just like the McCarthy era. You follow me? Right. And from my perspective and what I know, this is hearsay. They said SCLC was about to put him out of SCLC. All right, what did you say about the Rothschilds and who?
Those were benefactors.
Yeah, but they were the benefactors of a lot of our national organizations. That's the point. That's the point. All right, run with it.
So then, when he started to speak out against the money sources, that's when the troubles became more prominent. That's when the counterintelligence program really started to sow more discord in the community and to make him out as more of a troublemaker and rebel rouser. But what King had to come to realize himself was the position that he had to take. And I mean, even when you look at the nonviolence strategy, I think he came to understand that was just a strategy as well. It's not a lifestyle. We can't allow the enemy just to whoop on our heads and expect that that's going to, allow us to continue in our state of existence and thriving as a human being. But he understood as a strategy. That was that philosophy that I know him as Yehoshua. They call him Jesus, but I know him as Yehoshua. He said, if you get smacked, turn the other cheek. Because what that does, if you that bold to do what you're doing, I'm going to give you this. If you really going to do it, I'm going to see. And that's going to expose your underbelly. And that's what King's strategy was. It is not a lifestyle. It is not something that is to be carried out daily. But it was a strategy, a very crucial strategy for that moment. And people struggled with that.
I think that is the point where him and Malcolm really came together. See, I'm more of a Malcolm. Right. As I said in Dre's interview, you hit me, I'm clubbing you. Right. You cut me, I'm shooting you. Right. Our nature is forgiving.
It is.
And I think it's a strategy, just like nonviolence was a strategy with Muhammad Gandhi. Right. It's not a lifestyle.
It's not a lifestyle.
But I think that the narrative changed, and we feel it's a lifestyle.
Right.
Forgiveness and so forth.
Right. I think of the man whose brother was killed that ended up hugging the police officer. Shot his
brother and the judge and all of that. Yeah.
Right. Sometimes we do got to draw lines of demarcation, like, no, this is not acceptable at all. And while forgiveness may be something that can be offered given the contrite heart of the person who offends, you just don't give forgiveness out. It's like respect. I'm not just going to just respect you if you don't earn your respect, right? So you have to make sure that, when you're doing things like that, it has to be principally based. We can get too emotional sometimes and not established in the principle. And that's something I really look at Dr. King's latter life as. He was more principled at that particular moment, whereas he was kind of just, I would say in the beginning, kind of taking some orders. Malcolm called him the big five. I forgot who he was talking about. He was talking about Abernathy. He was talking about King and some other the inner circle. But he was like, they're the appropriationists. They're not really for the liberation of our people, right? And so Malcolm was like, look, I'm a separatist, period. But what Malcolm came to realize in his trip to Mecca was like, humanity is humanity, because what we're dealing with, at the end of the day, he said it's not black and white, it's right and wrong, it's righteous and wicked, right?
Excellent points you're making.
Those are the realities we got to wrestle with even today. And I think that's something Dr. King, towards the end of his life, came to realize more so. Because even when you do look at the civil rights movement, I think of Abraham Joshua Heschel. He was a rabbi. No, he was more of a philosopher. He was a Jewish philosopher. And Heschel, who I read a lot of his works as well, was a very huge proponent of the civil rights movement and was sincere and genuine.
Well, from my recollection in the 60s, I was still young, the Jewish community somewhat walked hand in hand with the civil rights movement because they had experienced some of the same oppression. And on another note, that's why I don't understand what Israel is doing to the Palestinians, because that was done to them, and it seemed like they would know and sympathize with the Palestinians.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Yes.
I don't know if you want to open them can of worms, but
well, we're talking about King, but again,
right.
Where would you think King would be standing on that?
With the Palestinians.
All right, then. We're talking about King, and we're talking about what's going on in the world today.
He says a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere, right? So when we're looking at what the plight of the Palestinians is presently, I mean, and understanding the asymmetric warfare that goes on, in the sense that, you know, what Israel has in terms of their budget for military as opposed to what Palestine has for their budget, it's asymmetric. It's not equal. It's not even. It's not a fair fight, right? And so King he would bring that to light, you know. So those are the things that we got to recognize today internationally, and that's something that I think his vision even moved to after his Vietnam speech. When the Vietnam speech came in, he internationalized the struggle. It became less local and more international, and that's something that Malcolm was already ahead of.
Right.
He's like, forget civil rights, we need to be talking about
human rights.
So when you're dealing with that particular paradigm, it expands the scope of our struggle internationally, because that's something even I think in Kansas City we have to understand. Yes, we have some issues in Kansas City, but we have larger issues as a people in the African diaspora. Right, we can identify with people who are struggling in Brazil, with people who are in Malaysia struggling,
people of color
everywhere, right? And so when we can connect with that struggle with the oppressed people's movement, then it becomes a more solid foundation for us to stand on and to build on and to use to our liberation efforts, right? And understand the responsibility that comes with that. And I think that's something that King was pointing to towards the end of his career, even with his last speech of being on the mountaintop. Like, people take that out of context.
He had one after that.
The mountaintop was the last speech. That was the last night of his life, if I'm not mistaken. When he gave that last speech, that next morning he woke up, and that's when some of his crew took him out on the balcony and he got killed. You know he didn't die on the balcony.
That's what they say. I haven't hands up. I haven't done all the research on that.
He died in the hospital. They performed CPR despite having
the gunshot wound
into the throat. You know, so his passageway. He potentially could have lived, but everything happens for a reason. And so, you know, the international struggle for people's rights, human rights, is something that he really moved towards to the end of his career. And even understanding, like, look, I may not get there with you, but we as a people going to get to the promised land. And that's something, again, that's taken completely out of context, because if you read that whole speech, he was literally in Jerusalem with his wife, speaking about what his visit to the top of Mount Zion was like. And so when he's speaking to that, he's not speaking of an America promised land. He's speaking of a literal, as Dre Taylor was talking about, a repatriation, a return to our homeland. And that's completely something that's taken out of context with Dr. King, because he wasn't speaking in metaphorical terminology. Yeah. He was being quite literal, if you understood the context of his entire speech, because he talked about what his visit was like in the I've been to the mountaintop speech of when he and his
How much progress do you think the African American community here in the United States have made 50 years later?
We've regressed. Culturally, we've regressed.
How do you feel the mindset of African Americans in this community is as it relates to the civil rights struggle, working together, pooling our resources together?
Right.
Because as I see it, and a lot of people might not like what I say, right, I feel our middle class is the biggest hindering, because our middle class, they move out to the suburbs, they're chasing the majority community, they're really not working and using their resources collectively. You know, when Rosa Parks and them said they weren't going to sit at the back of the bus, and the bus strike went on, our whole community was solid. Now I feel parts of the community, hey, I'm not going to do that. I got money to sit at the front of the bus, or I got money to go in that hotel because you don't have it. And there's the solidarity. Yeah. And what do you?
That's a cultural regression. You know what I'm saying? Or degradation, what you want to call it, because we've bought more into a Western capitalist mindset now, right? Where it's individualized, it's not collectivist, right? So I'm politically and even culturally, I lean towards a left, type of paradigm where I'm like, we're going to be communal, right? We're going to be social, collective, because that's where our strength is. Our strength is not just in numbers, but our strength is in unity. Right. So when we understand that,
why do you hold it? Cutting you off. Why do you see all the people that I'm talking about? They have all these masters and PhDs and so forth, and can't and right. And how I look at it is that to get where they're at, and all of that really started 50 years ago when African Americans were able to break into these corporation positions, but they're the only ones looking like who they are in that position, and they were able to move out to the suburbs, and their kids were able to go to different schools and so forth. They had to do that. You have to be able to assimilate with the people that you're working with, but then taking on their values is a whole different
I wouldn't even say assimilate. You have to be able to coordinate your efforts, right? Because you still are an individual, and you still.
No, I'm talking about to get into corporate America.
That, though, even within
I think you had to be a certain type of African American. It's no different from when Jackie Robinson broke into the major leagues. Yeah, what did Rick Brant? He
gonna be willing to take this.
Yeah, right. And he did, but he never bought into their values. That's what I'm saying. And the values become economics. Everything is above economics. Look how the country's going under Trump. Look at the Republican Party per se. Republican Party, me coming up, Republican Party was God, family, and country. Now it's all about dollars. And so there's a difference, and I think a large portion of the African American middle class has taken that approach. And if it's going to hurt me financially, I don't want to be bothered. And if you're talking about subjects like we're talking about right now, and you laying it out, hey, I don't want to get too close to Mr. Nelson because he is radical. I'm not radical. You can kill a messenger. I'm just telling you what I see. It's just like the rappers nowadays. You want to say it's them. No, they're talking about what they're seeing every day. Yeah, part of it is they can do it in a different way, but if they weren't seeing it, they wouldn't be rapping about it. So how you feel about, just what
I mean, the middle class has always played a very interesting role in our social reality. And again, going back to the talented 10th, like when you look at the bourgeoisie, so to speak, they've always almost been the power brokers to somehow to keep the natives, the restless natives, passive, right? So in order to really bring about a coordinated and concerted effort of a true reality for us in terms of having our needs met, they've been the ones who've just given us just the scraps we need to just stay above, that restlessness. Dr. King said though that a riot, not saying I'm not advocating violence or rioting, but he said that's the cry, that's the last result, the result of the hopeless. There's nothing else that we're resorting to Because if you're keeping someone chained up and locked up and marginalized, ultimately they're going to, uprise. There's no other recourse that can be done. Right?
That's the only way South Africa changed the government.
Hands
But
down.
but at the same time, a lot of the leadership.
There it is, the misleadership.
Yeah, right.
The
I will
misleadership.
not say put that on Nelson Mandela, but the ones that were out and got used to having the finer things in life. As I had a conversation earlier, if you've only had bologna, you think bologna is fine until they throw that steak out. And then, but we've been on bologna. We was on the pig feet, the hog guts, made chillings, made them delicacies and what have you. But soon as they let you taste steak and lobster and shrimp, now that's all the appetite you have, and whatever it takes to have that, that's what you do, and that's the way I see the middle class. Whatever it takes to keep me out in the suburbs and keep my kids here, the whole I'm not worried about.
Indeed, and this goes back, I would say, to what we were talking about in terms of vision, ideology, and again, it's not about color. It's about what's right, not who's right, what's right. So when we're dealing with this class, they get co-opted into the power.
But they don't want to look in the mirror and see that. When I have those conversations,
But
it's like I'm sour
that's not
grapes.
their reality anymore. Right? So there was an article, I didn't read the entire article, but it's on Facebook. I saw it posted on Facebook, and it's a Pew report, I believe. It talks about how when blacks get empowered, they do not empower other blacks.
Right, and I don't understand.
That's the problem.
You know, as I said, Cascade Media Group is the only black-owned digital media company in the Midwest, and we have school systems. We have a lot of different black businesses and people that are very quick with government money to give white and majority-owned companies big contracts and won't even give or try to help a small black business or a large black business to an extent, and that baffles me. And then they will say, well, you need to go through the system. Donald Trump has laid it all the way out of America. It's a pay to play, and it's an influential thing. You see how the Republicans are covering up all his misdeeds and all his lies, and it's all behind that almighty dollar.
And it's cronyism. It's a lot of
but I'm saying they got it on that dollar. In God we trust, and that's their God.
Hands down.
Hands down. All right. And so when I said that we've not only assimilated a lot of us, we've taken on their value. And their value is don't let nothing get in the way of that dollar and me having that shrimp and steak and living out.
So that's one of the three. That's one of the three problems that King recognized: materialism. We've become materialists, like gross materialists. Where we're just amassing items and putting value to the items, but we're using humanity. We're exploiting humanity. But that's capitalism. That's what capitalism does, and we become the capitalist as opposed to become the humanist.
And I'm gonna switch up. And I said I wasn't gonna do this, but I am. It's like the NFL. All right. How can any black support the NFL when you know how they feel? NFL is probably about 85 or 75% African Americans. They got 3 black coaches, and they've got us so conditioned. We go out and buy all this apparel. We go out and we can't wait to see the games and what have you. But we're not benefiting from none of that economically for the most part. There's a few people that are playing the sport and get that money, right? But overall, it's all about being programmed, and it's all about making money, and we don't want to look at that,
right?
And when I wouldn't buy NFL or I didn't look at none of that cheap stuff, and I'm happy for Kansas City to go to the Super Bowl and what have you, but I am not happy with how the NFL have treated African Americans, and with them Dallas Cowboys, their owner, if you do anything disrespectful to the flag, this and that, you're off the team. And I'm saying, what part of our community, especially them with all the PhDs and masters, you don't understand? and then you get out here and rah rah rah. But if it's something dealing with your own community, you hardly support it.
That's a problem.
You come, you go to the churches, and then you go back out to your haven, and then you have these little groups, and that makes you feel good. And not that these groups don't do some things, but collectively you're not doing anything. Our community is operating in their own little power bases, our ministers, our groups, and what have you. It's not a collective effort.
Right. And I mean, I strive to be a man whose principles come from the scripture. It's, it says, what you do to the least of these, you do to me. And that's something that we got to recognize. That's something Dr. King recognized. With the Poor People's Campaign, he said we got to develop a reckless sense of selflessness to the degree where it's not what would happen if this person, doesn't do something. What happens if I don't do something? And that's what we got to think of. Like, if I don't contribute to this person's plight, what's going to happen to that person, right? And a lot of times we don't put ourselves in the other. We don't put our I in thou, is what Heschel would talk about. And so we have to really, develop a selflessness. That's something when you're dealing with materialists that doesn't happen. This world is very cynical. People have become extremely selfish. You got iPhones, you got iPads, you got all these things that point to the self, the individual, but
didn't even realize that.
You know what I'm saying? So I mean, it points to that though. And so we have to.
That's if you were paying attention.
Selfie, you know what I'm saying?
The selfie, right?
So we have almost a narcissistic state of existence today, where we just really are focused on self. And the thing about leadership, I love this quote: leaders don't think less of themselves. Leaders think of themselves less, right? They're not the focus of the whole movement. And that's another problem that we had. So when King and Malcolm died, our community being leader-centered groups, we completely went haywire. But we need to develop a group-centered leadership. And that's where it really comes from. I'm going to have a talk show. I'm going to plug this.
Go ahead.
Shifting Paradigms is going to be having the new era of leadership with the Black United Front, Casey Buff.
Those
talking with them.
Power to the people. Those are my people.
Leadership.
Yeah, those are my people.
About leadership. So we're going to really, shift that paradigm from a leader-centered group to group-centered leadership, because that's what we find ourselves always falling behind when our leaders get plucked. We get the head, and so goes the body. The head gets taken off, the body just withers. So we got to keep everybody in a role of leadership.
I'm going to give my boy Brandon Ellington some kudos, because I think he's one of the politicians here that are really grassroots. He makes no apologies about who he is and who he represents.
And service. It's a servant-based leadership. That's what we have to understand, because now it's like, if I got money, I can put that in your pocket. These lobbyists who have no limit on what they can supply to the politicians now, that's completely unequitable, right? So the equity that is supposed to be present is never, the justice is never going to be present. I can purchase somebody.
As I said to you earlier, I wasn't going to talk about that NFL because I had some discussion with my vice presidents and some other people. Well, you talk about that, you won't be able to get the sponsorship and the blah, blah, blah. And I just have to weigh it. If they don't want to do sponsorship and do what Cascade Media because of something that I'm saying that has truth to it, then we really don't need their money.
Yeah, exactly. So principle, what's the principle? What's your value? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So you have to find those who have like values, because they're out there.
You see, I said I didn't want to do it, but you see it came out because my principles override that financial consideration.
What does it profit a man to gain the world and lose his soul? So you got to definitely make sure, as I strive myself, and I'm not a perfect person, but we strive to uphold the values and principles to which we're convicted of. And you got to stand on that. And it's not going to be popular. It's not going to be popular. But that's what makes you a leader.
And you know what? That's the killing part to me, especially in Christianity and in our community. You want to say that you're a Christian and you believe in Jesus Christ, but if Jesus Christ came here today, you wouldn't recognize him.
At all.
Because Jesus Christ was throwing the money people out the temple.
Very much so.
Yeah. Jesus Christ was with the poor people.
Very much so.
They weren't out in he wasn't out in the suburb. He wasn't in the castle.
Nope. He said he don't even have a place to lay his head. Fox
Right.
got holes. The Son of Man don't got nowhere to lay his head.
Yeah. King wasn't no rich man.
No. He was middle class. You know, he was raised in the middle class in
Yeah.
Atlanta, but he chose to identify with those who did not have.
Right.
Have not.
And not just here. Globally, as we're talking about. His vision
was global.
You
It
know.
became global. It became global, and that's the evolution I'm talking about. And that's something we really got to recognize about his legacy and his growth. He did not stop growing. He did not stop challenging himself to get a wider perspective of the global landscape of social political interaction. You know, and he had a spiritual impetus. You know, his paradigm was kingdom centered, which is something tonight, 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock on Facebook. You can check us out.
Run it down. Because in closing, we're going to wrap this up. What are some of your closing thoughts, and what would you impart to our audience?
I mean, be the change you want to see. You know, that's crucial. If you want to
My
see
girl,
change,
Dr. Marjorie Williams, that was how she closed her program.
That's crucial.
Yeah.
That's crucial. If you want change, you have to be that change. If you want, anything, you have to be the epitome of it yourself. And I'm not saying you have to be perfect in that, but you should strive to lead a life that embodies those principles. And that's something I work on every day. You know, I'm engaged, to a beautiful woman. I want to be a model husband, and I'm learning. I take my lumps, I'm a father. I take my lumps as a father. I want my boys to look at me and know what it is to be a man, and that's something I'm still learning. Manhood is a real mountain to climb.
Boy,
and
isn't it?
I'm striving, to get to the peak of that, and even go to the next level in that. So it's like, in doing so, you have to really look at yourself. Consider your ways. There's a passage from the book of Habakkuk that says, consider your ways. And that's something that we all have to do. It doesn't matter what walk of life you're in, consider your ways and how you're contributing to the development and evolution of humanity, because it's coming, and either you're going to be with that ride or you're not, and it's the time for light to shine, and I pray that, with myself and those who I circle myself with are all seeking to enter into the light, and that's who I affiliate with. I don't deal with a lot of darkness. I mean, we got our own personal struggles, and we wrestle with that, but I'm not gonna put myself in just dark, So, and I thank you for the opportunity to be here. But I was gonna say 6 o'clock tonight, KUAW.org. You can check Shifting Paradigms out. I'm having a guest tonight. His name is James Bryan. He's the senior pastor for the Metropolitan Spiritual Church of Christ, and we're going to be talking about kingdom paradigmatics, and we're going to dedicate the show actually to Dr. King, being that this is the day that is recognized for what his legacy is, and we're going to just be talking about really comparing and contrasting global political landscape, in terms of what the scripture espouses as a kingdom paradigm, and then what paradigm we're existing in today, if they either hit or miss. And we're just going to wrestle with that tonight.
Excellent. I probably will tune in. And as we always say on closing, that when you invest in your community, you're really just investing in yourself.
This is brought to you by Kansas City Business Association, working to improve our community.